All right, we are going to do a fear setting practice, and I'm going to start with this quote from Tim Ferriss that I love, and that is, most people will choose unhappiness over uncertainty. And I think this is really sums up the root of fear and why we won't make a decision because we're afraid of it. We'd rather be unhappy than uncertain. But I'm here to help walk you through the process of fear setting and overcoming our fears or moving through them so that we can choose happiness. So the first thing we want to do is to name your fear. And this can be a writing prompt. So you get pen and paper out and name your fear and try to be specific as possible. In naming the fear, it's going to help us release the fear, because in our head, we might be ruminating on, for me, I'll use the example of moving to Costa Rica and starting a new job like I did. And I was afraid that the business might not work out. And so I needed to name that fear. I'm afraid that the business might not work and that I'll be broke. And I have a 2-year-old daughter and I'm married, and that's not good. Okay, I'm afraid of that. So be specific. Maybe you want to leave a relationship and you're afraid to end the relationship because you don't want to hurt your partner, or you're afraid of being alone. Okay, name that fear. Then through that, we're going to be able to release it. Okay, and it's not going to just happen one time, right? You might have to do this a few times. It could be a daily practice leading up to the action that you're going to take. Okay, then we want to go through worst case scenarios. Okay, so in the fear setting practice, what's the worst thing that will happen when I have this conversation, when I quit my job, when I end the relationship? For me, going back to my example of moving to Costa Rica and being afraid that the business might fail and I might be broke, the worst thing that would happen is that I go broke and I have to move back in with my parents. That's worst case scenario. Now I can go, all right, I'm okay with that. It's not ideal, but that's worst case scenario. And so now if we know the end game in a sense, and that will also release some of its power. Okay, worst case scenario, write it out, and then don't hold back. Be honest with yourself. And often you're going to find that it's not all that bad. And it might feel bad if you're ruminating on it, but writing it out is going to release the fear. Okay. And the last thing that you can do is to get perspective and ask yourself what the cost of inaction is. Okay. So if you don't do this thing that you're afraid of, for me, it was moving to Costa Rica. If I didn't move to Costa Rica, the cost is I'll never have the opportunity to live in a place with amazing surf and warm water and pursue this career as a stand-up paddle surf retreat business owner. And I'm going to regret that. Okay. So having that in my head of that's the cost of this inaction. And often I feel like it's going to be regret, or maybe if the cost is staying in an unhappy, toxic relationship, the cost is your happiness and being in an unloving relationship and not the potential for being in a loving one. Because if you choose to stay in this one that is unfulfilling and not loving, that's coming at a cost of your happiness and also not being in that loving one. So write this out and release these fears into the air, onto paper, maybe burn the paper at the end and release them. And you'll find a lot of value in the perspective that you gain through putting your fears down on paper into the world, and then realizing often that the worst case scenario is not that bad, and the cost of inaction is actually quite unfavorable. And so get out there and conquer your fears through this practice and live the life of your dreams.